Coming up on Killer Genes.
When I drove down there, as I got closer and closer, I got more worried and more upset.
A father's worst nightmare.
Looked around, and then I found her. And that was the worst day of my life.
And law enforcement needs your help to track a killer.
So it's our understanding that they have DNA.
Exclusive new information into the murder of Angelina Sicola.
Let me first tell you that I'm going to share something that hasn't been shared publicly, but I think it's interesting to share because it might open up some conversation.
The following episode of Killer Genes contains graphic and sensitive information and material. Listener discretion is advised.
Emmy-nominated true crime journalists bring you cases like you've never heard them before. Hear firsthand accounts from the victims' families, private investigators, lawyers, law enforcement, and even the convicted. Giving you a complete 360 of the case like no one else can.
I'm Melissa McCarty.
I'm Kelly McClear.
And this is Killer Genes.
Angelina Sicola, affectionately called Angie, was a 20-year-old sophomore at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. Colorado Springs is known as Olympic City, USA, as it is home to the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee headquarters and training centers. Angie herself was a rising star athlete, obtaining her black belt in taekwondo and even teaching at the local academy. She was the youngest of a blended family and had aspirations much like other young women her age. But all that would be taken away from her in 2013, when she was found dead in her apartment. The coroner ruled her death a homicide by strangulation.
Angie was surrounded by a loving family, and we spoke with her father, Steve, sister Amber, stepsister Susan, and her former stepmother, Jane. The story they were about to tell you is heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, a 7-year-old homicide case that has all but gone cold, but that also has the possibility of being solved at any moment, and you'll hear why a little later.
But what made Angie so special to her friends and family? Her former stepmother, Jane, remembers her big dreams.
So Angie was almost always on top of the world, right? She had a big plan from the time she was a little kid, and that didn't really change as she approached college.
Angie and her stepsister, Susan, had many conversations about the future.
I think her biggest focus at that point was getting through school and getting done with school so that she could take over the world. Like, she just wanted to do big things. And as my mom said, that dream changed over time. And I think she was really just trying to find herself and figure out where she belonged and what would make her happy in the long term. And I think, like most college students, she wasn't really sure what that looked like yet, but I know her dreams were big.
Angie was not only majoring in communications, but also was dedicated to her love of taekwondo.
She was excellent. She was a black belt. She had been to some national competitions. In fact, she was teaching at the Taekwondo Academy. It wasn't long after she became serious about it that they actually brought her in to help work there. So she worked there part-time as a desk. She did some instruction. She did a number of things for the Taekwondo Academy. She traveled nationally for tournaments that they had. And she was good. She was a black belt. I mean, she just was good at what she did.
Angie's sister Amber knew how much the sport meant to her.
We had divorced parents. It was tough growing up with divorced parents, and they gave her kind of a second family to go to when she was feeling like she needed a little extra help. So it was always really important to her to go to Taekwondo.
Like any college-age young woman, it was time for Angie to move out of her father Steve's house and into her own apartment.
She went and lived with a friend for a while she went to school. And then she moved into her own apartment. But she continued like her normal life. You know, when people hear about a 20-year-old getting murdered, they're like, oh, what was she into and who was she hanging around with? You know, Angie was into being the queen of taekwondo, getting straight A's, being on the dean's list. She was just a good girl. She was a good kid. And that wasn't any different when she was 20 than when she was 15. She had a normal teenagehood. You know, every teenager has some little rebellions here and there. Nothing drastic or dramatic. And it was kind of the same in college. It was such a shock because she was so loved and liked and known by so many and trusted, and she was just such a good kid.
Was Angie dating anybody in 2013?
Angie was seeing someone on and off, and at the time of her death, they were off.
How long was that relationship on and off for?
Maybe a year, maybe 9 months, something like that. They had split up. Their last breakup was in March. I know that much. Early March. No, March 2 months before she was killed.
So 2013.
Yeah. The family liked him. He was a nice guy.
Rob was the only gentleman that she was seeing off and on, and you guys didn't know of anybody else that she might have gone on a date with?
And no, and I feel like Angie was pretty conservative where that's concerned. I feel like Rob was probably one of the first people that she even dated somewhat seriously. She was pretty conservative, and I feel like even if she had gone on a date, she probably wouldn't have mentioned it to us until it was somebody that she was really interested in.
In early 2013, Angie was suffering from an ankle injury and had recently gotten an MRI on it. May 2nd, she was to meet with the doctors and get the results and learn her future in Taekwondo. For this doctor's visit, Angie wanted her father Steve there with her.
What you are about to hear is one of the hardest interviews I've personally ever done. Steve Sicola recounts the events that happened that day, May 2nd, 2013. Can you tell me what the plan was for May 2nd of 2013?
Well, I used to take her to things when she was in a scary situation. She had gotten an MRI at this place, and she wanted me to be there at the Colorado Orthopedic Associates. She really wanted me to be there with her when she got the results of the MRI.
Do you remember what time you were supposed to meet at the doctor's office?
11:30 a.m.
Okay.
When I got to the front desk, I asked, I think I'm here after she's gone into the doctor, but Angelina Sicola. And I just kind of said, and they looked around and says, well, she hasn't checked in yet. And I was like, huh? That's not Angie. You know, she's a stickler to time.
Had you and Angie talked that morning, though, either on the phone or text, saying, I'll meet you over there or anything like that?
Last time I think I talked to her was on April 30th.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily talk every day because she had stuff to do and friends to see and all this stuff. And but you know, she called me the night of the 30th. You know, when she wasn't there at that place at the Orthopedic Associates at 11:40. It's 11:45 now. I kind of started getting worried. Things that went through my mind was that, you know, maybe she slept in from maybe having a migraine or whatever. But, you know, it was her day to have had a couple classes, I think, and then was supposed to switch her parking pass with Amber, because they shared one parking pass because they all had classes at different times.
Worried on why Angie had not shown up to the doctor's appointment, Steve decides he would go to Angie's apartment and check in on her. And what he would find, no parent should ever have to go through.
Anyway, when I drove down there, as I got closer and closer, I got more worried and more upset. And I was relieved to find her car there, right? I didn't look in at the time. I was relieved to find her car there. But then, when I got to her apartment, it just looked like it was, set up for night with all the drapes closed, et cetera, et cetera. And then when I reached for the door handle, it was open, and that was, so I really got my heart in my throat.
Was the door unlocked, or was it kind of that slightly ajar?
No, it was unlocked.
And the drapes were shut.
I walked in because I didn't have a key to the place. So I walked in and looked around, and then I found her. And that was the worst day of my life. And I just freaked out. Said I know I screamed for at least 5 minutes straight. I just couldn't bear it, And, seeing her the way I saw her, which I'm not going to divulge that.
Amber, Angie's sister, had a parallel timeline, but unfortunately, her and her father's worlds would collide. So, Amber, why don't you walk us through your day of May 2nd, 2013?
Angie and I shared a school parking pass, and that was the day that she usually went to school really early, and I was on my way to school for a late morning class. We usually connected in the parking lot to pass off the pass and usually pass off parking spaces. So I would see her in the parking lot and take her spot, and then take a shared pass to the school, and then she would just go home. And I couldn't get a hold of her. I thought maybe she overslept. So we had a break from our class, and I went ahead and called my dad on the break and told him that I couldn't get a hold of her. And it turns out she had an appointment that day for something else that she was supposed to meet him for, a medical appointment. And so he said, she didn't show up for that. So he was concerned, and so he would go over and check on her and make sure she just overslept. And so I said, okay, just let me know. And then he called me about I'm not sure how much later, and just kind of was in tears and told me that she was dead. And I was in denial. I asked him if he had called 911. He said yes. But he refused to do any CPR on her, even though I kept asking him to do CPR. I wasn't there, and even if it wouldn't have done any good. And so I just told my professor I have to go. Just drove over to the apartment, called my dad back, pleaded with him some more to do CPR. He just kept telling me she's gone.
Angie's former stepmother, Jane, recounts the moment she received the tragic news.
Jane, when did you receive the news on May 2nd?
Probably very shortly after he entered her apartment. It's kind of a whirlwind, that couple of hours there. Trying to remember exactly what happened, but I was in California. I was actually working in California at the time, and I had a long drive that day from San Diego. I had about a 5-hour drive, and I saw that Steve was calling, so I took the call, and he was still in her apartment. And so he told me he found her and that she was dead and that he didn't really know anything else. I believe the police were already there at the time he called me. Yeah, I mean, he was, it was a crazy phone call. Nobody expects that call. And he was pretty hysterical, and I was pretty hysterical, trying to get myself off of I-5 before I killed myself on top of it. So that was how I learned. He called me and told me.
Susan, how did you find out?
I was leaving work, and my husband actually asked me to call him. And so I called him on my way home, and he said that he had something to tell me, but he wouldn't tell me until I got home. And so, of course, I knew something was terribly wrong, and I was begging him to tell me all the way home, like, what is happening, what's going on, and he wouldn't tell me. He was in Colorado at the time, and I was in Mississippi. And, so I pulled into my garage, and I got out of the car, and I said, I'm home, tell me. And he said, Angie died.
Steve finds his 20-year-old daughter Angie dead in her apartment. No one knows why. No one knows how. The Colorado Springs Police Department launched a full investigation.
Angie had a history of migraines, and so I feel like my first inkling was like, maybe it was something like that. He didn't know what happened. Like, there was nothing obvious that he could see on her. So we weren't really sure. And at the time, we were just kind of assuming it was some horrible accident or, something that happened in her body. Like, it didn't even occur to us that it would have been something else. I think we all kind of thought, like, it was an accident of some sort. Like I said, like, was this, like some freak aneurysm? Was this a drug overdose? Not that Angie ever did drugs, but I mean, we were trying to stack our brains with things like that. And I don't think homicide was even on our radar.
But the family would soon learn that Angie's death was no accident. When did you learn about what happened to Angie, and what did they tell you happened to Angie?
We went home, and they said they would come talk to us. They came to tell us specifically what was that they were ruling it a homicide based on the coroner's findings. The police were the ones who told us that she had been strangled. When they came over to our house to tell us that it had been ruled a homicide, I specifically asked if she had been raped. They said they couldn't give out those details at this time. We still don't know. The only details that they could give out was that she had been strangled.
Jane says that Steve called her 2 days later with the news. I mean, what were your thoughts when you hear that? Homicide, murder. I mean, this is somebody who's a taekwondo instructor, a black belt. What was going through your mind when you hear those words?
All the things that are going through your mind. Like, how's that possible? She's a black belt in taekwondo. How could that be? I mean, the same thing any normal person would think, or there's nobody, there's nothing. Like, Angie never ran in the band crowd. Angie never had untrustworthy or unruly friends. There was just nothing logical about Angie being murdered. It just didn't fit at all.
Angie had no known enemies. Investigators questioned her neighbors, friends, and coworkers, and nothing panned out. But what about the guy Angie had an on and off relationship with?
He was fully cooperative when she died. He was completely exonerated by the police. So it's not like there's any issue there.
And she never mentioned anything about a beef with a neighbor, a coworker, a fellow student, anybody at taekwondo. She had no known enemies.
The only thing notable about that is that when she came to visit me in March, when she stopped by the house, she was talking about the apartment, and we were just talking about life in general. And she just made a quick reference. And I shared this with the police, so I think it's fine if I share it with you. But she made a quick reference to the creeper that lived down the hall. She had a neighbor that just gave her a bad feeling.
I asked Steve if he knew anything about this. Do you know if this creepy guy down the hall was ever questioned?
Oh, yes, he was totally interrogated.
Okay, and they cleared him?
I suppose if they have something else on him, I wouldn't know.
So just what did law enforcement have? They have released few details to the local media over the years, but Angie's family reveals exclusive information to us 7 years later.
One thing that does stand out surrounding Angie's death is that Steve says when he got to the apartment that the door was unlocked. Would she ever leave her door unlocked? Would she ever come home from school and just not lock the door, feeling safe? Is that typical? Or, what did you come? What's your thoughts on if she would leave the door unlocked while home?
Let me first tell you that so Angie at home is a person that would pull her car into the garage, leave her keys in the car, leave her purse in the car, and that's how her car would sit in a closed garage. Angie lived in an apartment complex with outside entry. I don't believe that she would leave her door unlocked, but I'm not sure. I'm going to share something that hasn't been shared publicly, but I think it's interesting to share because it might open up some conversation. And that is that her purse and her phone were found in her car, and her door was found unlocked. And I have a personal theory about this that I also haven't shared with anyone, and it is, obviously no one knows what happened. The police know more than anyone, but I have a personal theory of what I think might have happened, because even though she was someone who would leave her purse in the car at home, I don't think she would do that in an apartment complex. And I believe her car was unlocked as well. And her phone, if you knew Angie, was always attached to her hand, and her phone was found in the car. So my personal theory, I guess you could say, because it's the only thing that makes sense in my mind, is maybe she was leaving her apartment. She got into her car. She had her purse, her phone, realized she forgot something, so got out of her car, leaving it unlocked, ran to her apartment real quick, opened the door to grab whatever she was getting, and was planning to head right back out, and something happened.
In that same thought process, I was going to add and say, do you think the person encountered her at her vehicle?
My inkling is no, and I say that because I don't know what this person's motive was. But why would you leave her purse? Why would you leave her phone? And that's one of the things that bothers me about it. If you did carjack her or get her at her car, I feel like you would take a purse, I think, unless you had a completely different motive. So from the outside looking in my perspective, I personally believe that she was met by this person at her apartment and not her car.
Amber also has a similar theory. Do you have any theories of what happened to your sister?
We've gone over it. I've gone over it a lot. There's multiple things that I think could have happened. She could have had someone over and it didn't go as planned. Someone could have been in the parking lot and just, ambushed her. Because as we've discussed, she has the skills to defend herself. But, when you're getting out of a car late at night, it's difficult to defend yourself in the dark if someone's going to ambush you. I feel like there probably was a weapon involved if she wasn't able to defend herself. It just seems like some sort of, again, ambush, surprise happened, because she always is very vigilant in locking her doors. Her phone's always attached at the hip.
And speaking of Angie's phone, Susan shared with us another key piece of information regarding the timeline. Remember that Angie was found dead on May 2nd, but neither Steve nor anyone else in the family talked to her since April 30th.
There is one thing I'd like to add, if you're okay with it, and that is, this happened at a time that social media was just starting to get really big. So I was on Facebook after this happened because I knew that Facebook had just come out with a thing that would tell you the last time somebody was logged in. So that's pretty common knowledge now. Everybody knows about it, but it was brand new back then. And so one of the first things I did when I got home was I logged in to see when she was last active on Facebook, and the date on there was April 30th. So that's one thing that I think would be interesting to get out. But knowing Angie and how connected to social media she was, I would assume that whatever happened that day, because she hadn't been active since that day. I think it's important because if people are just trying to rack their brains about one day when it could have really been another, it might be worth sharing.
That puts Angie's murder occurring between the night of April 30th and the morning of May 2nd.
And I think, if I remember correctly, when Steve found her, I think it was pretty obvious that it had been a while.
It's definitely been a difficult several years for him. He got the worst of this, Steve did, because what he has is something the rest of us don't have to live with, and it is the picture of finding her.
That leads me to my next question, because her cause of death was strangulation, asphyxiation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the most, if not the most personal, consider it one of the most personal ways to kill somebody because you have to get so close.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts when you found out she was strangled to death?
My thought was that'd be the only way somebody could probably take her down is if they took her from behind and surprised her. That's what I thought, because she's a black belt in taekwondo. You come at her from the front, I think she's going to try to defend herself.
I am not entirely sure. I mean, I have different thoughts about it. I guess going back to her taekwondo, I wonder, yes, you were a black belt, but if somebody is big enough, if somebody is strong enough, or there's more than one person, or they have a gun on you, I mean, your reaction is going to be different. And I think about the potential of somebody having a gun to her and maybe strangulation was quieter. It was an apartment complex with people all around. It's all speculation, I guess. I mean, my personal belief is that this was done by someone that she didn't know or didn't know well. So for me, I don't think of it, even though, history tells us that strangulation is personal. I personally don't get that in this scenario.
You probably won't reveal this, but was it a manual strangulation or was it with a ligature, meaning a rope, a cord, a belt?
They actually never told us. So in a recent report that they came out with, so they usually post something on her anniversary, and what they put in the blib, which I don't remember having seen before, was forcible strangulation.
Susan and Jane go on to reveal even more new information. And just because this is an unsolved case and I'm trying to think of motives, do you know if there was also a sexual assault associated with the murder?
We do not know. That has not been disclosed to us.
Is there anything else you guys can reveal about the crime scene, DNA, fingerprints in the apartment that law enforcement may have shared with you and that you would like to go public with, or is that about it?
So it's our understanding that they have DNA.
So they do. They have DNA. They've ruled out, several people that way. And I was speaking with the detective on the case just last week. I was talking to her about the potential for, they're doing
familial DNA?
Yes, that exactly. I was going to call it like genetic or ancestral DNA, but yeah, they are. There's new research coming out in cases that are being solved with, family chains of DNA. And so I mentioned that, and she told me that yes, that is one of the avenues that they're exploring. That they are. They even have lab samples out right now that they're awaiting results on that are taking longer than planned due to the current state of, COVID and everything going on right now. But yeah, that is the most up-to-date information from the detective I spoke with last week.
Revealing that investigators have DNA that they are actively testing, Angie's father, Steve, also recounts a dramatically important piece of information regarding the crime scene itself.
I worry about whether a lot of evidence was taken from the scene to clean up after what they did or who did. You know what I mean?
When you went into the apartment, but did it look like she had been robbed or that there was a struggle? Did it look like anything was stolen? Or did, you weren't even focused on that?
Oh, I did. I know that Thursdays were the days that she would always bring her laundry over to get cleaned. So one of my first things when I got in there was that I looked for that stuff and it was not there as the bed was stripped. And I saw some evidence of other laundry being there, but not that.
Oh, so like the bedding was gone on her bed.
Yep.
And it was nowhere in the apartment.
Yep.
Which you're right would lead to then this person or persons cleaned up after themselves.
Yep.
What's the interesting part about Angie's case, or I should say the disturbing part about it on the flip side, is that Colorado Springs Police Department is pretty well known for opening and shutting cases rather quickly. And in 2013, Angie's case was only one of 3 unsolved cases that year. What has been the last 7 years been like with them? Do they still consider Angie's case very active, very open investigation, or is it more along the lines of a cold case?
My experiences, anytime I'm in contact with them, they assure me that they still have evidence, that they're investigating, that they're still working on it. I mean, 7 years later, I think you assume it's a cold case. They don't obviously probably have somebody on it full time, but I understand that they've just continued it as an open investigation. And I have faith and confidence in them.
We did reach out to the Colorado Springs Police Department for an interview. While they declined our interview request, they did, however, answer a few questions via email.
And some of those we'd like to share with you all now.
One of the questions was regarding those interviewed and questioned surrounding Angie's death, and their response is as follows.
Quote, detectives have spent countless hours interviewing anybody who may have been associated with Angie. These associations could have been through her schooling, her extracurricular activities, hobbies, as well as those individuals in her social circle. So far, as a result of those multiple interviews, no suspect has been identified. Of course, we had to ask them about the status of the DNA testing.
Their response is as follows. As recently as early as 2020, detectives have yet again submitted items for potential DNA testing. With the advancements in DNA technology, it is the hope that a suspect profile will be identified. There are also advancements in the area of genetic genealogy, which the CSPD has used in cold case investigations. If a potential suspect profile is developed, it will be assessed to see if it fits the criteria for this type of process as well. I also asked the cold case detective why Angie's case has not been solved in over 7 years.
Their response, quote, every investigation is different with its own unique set of challenges. In this case in particular, there were multiple individuals who potentially would have known the victim due to her attending college, her hobbies, interests, and other social interactions. Detectives within the cold case unit continue to work on this case along with the other unsolved homicides with the goal of finding answers for families of the victims. Whether it is leveraging the advancements in DNA technology, re-interviewing witnesses, or soliciting information from the public in venues such as this podcast, detectives continue searching for that one key piece of evidence or information which could break the case open.
And now this is where the Killer Genes community comes in. If anyone has information they would like to provide, no matter how small they think it is, they can call the Colorado Springs Police Department. Or, if they wish to remain anonymous, they may call the Colorado Crime Stoppers tip line. And this is how you can further help law enforcement. Submit your DNA. Call with any tips. The fact that they have DNA is a step in the right direction. So it's not a matter of if it will be solved, but when, especially with all the new advancements in DNA testing.
And Kelly, this is such a huge issue right now, and there are many websites, 23andMe or GEDmatch, that do it and help aid police, but some will now only assist with a subpoena because of all the controversy. And I get it, is it necessary or is it a breach of information? I get both sides, but cases like Angie Sicola really bring to light the importance of having access to these databases. Angie's sister Susan also started a GoFundMe account to raise money for an award, that award being $10,000 for information that leads to an arrest.
And solving the case of Angie's death is not just for Angie, but for the loving family that has been left behind. Jane, what do you miss most about Angie?
I miss her silliness and her laughter. I miss the joy that she had at Christmas time. I miss, just the little unexpected things that she would say and do.
I think I miss most just her overall presence. It was so unique. She really was her own person and the things that she loved and enjoyed. And, just because someone she was around didn't like what she liked, it wouldn't stop her from, enjoying it. And she was hilarious and funny and sarcastic and nice, like all these wonderful things. And I just, more than anything, I just miss the presence of being around her.
So Jane, we'll start with you. What is your message to the persons or persons responsible for Angie's death?
You know, I'm a woman of faith, and I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to find Angie's killer or not. I certainly pray that we do. But I know that if this doesn't get dealt with here, there's a God up above who will deal with this in the proper way. And that's how I manage to maintain some peace of mind.
It's only a matter of time. That is my one message. I know that they will find the person who did this. I know that technology will be on our side, and they won't be able to hide. We will find them.
I also asked Amber if she has a message for the person or persons responsible for Angie's murder.
I guess I'd just like to know I would like to know why.
Do you feel that Angie's case will be solved?
At this point, unless there's some huge breakthrough in technology, I don't feel like it'll be solved. They've had I know they have talked about the breakthrough with genealogy and all that, but just having a cold case out there for this long, in a town that's growing, with a crime rate that's growing, it's just getting more stale. It doesn't. I guess my hopes are not high.
I really do feel for your dad, Amber. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine what that day was like for him on May 2nd, and what that must be like finding your daughter that way. And you can tell in his voice that the last 7 years have been extremely difficult for him. Do you see a day where he'll ever be at peace?
I see a day where if we choose to, it's going to be up to us to find that peace for ourselves, to find a new happiness, and to try and remember her the way she would want us to remember her, and live the life she'd want us to live, instead of living in the past and living that day over and over again until we waste away to nothing.
But finding that peace will be harder for some than others. What do you miss most about Angie? What do you miss most about her?
Her joie de vivre, you know. She really loved life, you know. She wanted to be in business. She wanted to be stylish. She wanted to be, a lot of different things. And all that stuff got stripped from her. And it's like, how can you take away somebody's future, completely? It's just a travesty in multiple dimensions.
Do you feel that you'll ever get the answers that you're looking for?
No. I don't. I think it would be, I think, like 1 in a million or a billion that they'll find what they need to find.
Why do you feel it's such a long shot?
Just a hunch. And based on how much time eclipsed between the last contact and when I found her.
Colorado Springs Police Department at the time only had 3 unsolved cases in 2013, and Angie's was one of them. And
that's right.
How frustrating for you has the last 7 years been?
It's emotionally messed me up bad. And I can say it's ruined my career. I can't think as well. I can't. It just doesn't work because, that picture is in my head forever. Like, first thing that comes to mind is that and everything that came with it.
Do you have a message for the persons responsible for Angie's murder? Or somebody that might have information?
Well, if somebody has information, I wish they'd come forward, that's for sure. I mean, that's the thing. Because I really don't know how I'm going to feel if they really get some solid, leads and find the person. I've been to Israel, and they're all about eye for an eye. And for me, I'm just like, this karma. I mean, I've studied enough religions. I just say, well, karma will be justice in the end. If you don't come forward, you're doing a lot of people disservice who are still in pain. So I could say, if you don't turn yourself in, don't get found, karma will get you somehow.
This has been Killer Genes.
And we always want to hear from you. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Killer Genes, the podcast.